Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. This is Tariq. In the previous lecture we were learning about the concept of probability and we discussed about the different terminologies of the probability. We were discussing the concept of sample space and we defined that sample space represent the set of outcomes of an experiment. For example, toss a coin twice. So this is one experiment and this experiment carry two steps or two trials. We will toss a coin twice, two times. So how many outcomes are possible? 4 outcomes are possible. And the total 4 outcomes of an experiment is called sample space. Like for example, toss a coin twice. So sample space is this. The set of the outcomes of tossing a coin 2 times is this. Head, head. Head, tail, tail, head, or tail, tail. Now, how these outcomes happen? How these outcomes occur? For example, the Afghanistan team captain is playing a tournament against India in Delhi, and now in the first match the captain of Afghanistan team is tossing. The team has to play 2 games. So how many experiments? 2 experiments. So when the 2 games, the captain of Afghanistan team will toss a coin twice. So how many experiments? 2 experiments. Suppose Afghanistan team captain toss a coin in Delhi and Afghanistan team captain win the toss. So there is head on the up face of the coin. Means Afghanistan team win the toss in the first match. And now in the second match, because the tournament carry 2 matches. So in the first match Afghanistan team win toss, they win and there is head first outcome on the first toss. And these we have to toss a coin twice. So now Afghanistan team captain is again tossing in Madras. So again when Afghanistan team captain toss, again there is head. So in 2 tosses, 2 times heads are possible. That in Delhi, when the captain toss, he win and there is head on the up face of the coin. And when Afghanistan team captain again toss in Madras, so again second toss, again win and again there is head. So that is why I write first outcome head and second outcome is also head of the 2 tosses. But this is another possibility. This is possible that the Afghanistan team captain win both tosses at Delhi and at Madras. So that is why head and head. But this is also possible that Afghanistan team captain win the toss at Delhi. There is head on the up face of the coin. But the Afghanistan team captain lose the toss in Madras. So this is first toss outcome head and this is second toss outcome tail. Because we have to toss a coin twice. So first toss at Delhi, Afghanistan team win the toss. But second toss at Madras, Afghanistan team lose the toss. So this is also possible that both tosses Afghanistan team win head and head. This is also possible. These outcomes are also possible, that first toss Afghanistan team win and second toss Afghanistan team lose, because experiment carry 2 steps, 2 trials. We have to toss twice. This is also possible. This outcome is also possible. ये हम इम्कानात दार कि Afghanistan team lose the first toss at Delhi. There is a tail on the up face of the coin. But this is also possible that Afghanistan team win the second toss at Madras. So tail and head. This is another possibility and 2 outcomes of 2 tosses. And this is the last possibility, which is the fourth outcome, that Afghanistan team lose the first toss at Delhi. There is a tail on the up face of the coin, and the second toss again Afghanistan team lose at Madras. There is a tail on the up face of the coin. So how many ihtimalat, how many possibilities are possible? Head head, head tail, tail head, or tail tail. Means the first outcome, Afghanistan team lose both tosses. These are the two, Afghanistan team win both tosses. There is head on the up face, and again there is head on the up face of the coin. This is another possible outcome, that Afghanistan team win the first toss and lose the second toss, tail. This is another possibility, the Afghanistan team lose the first toss, there is tail on the up face of the coin, and win the second toss, there is a head on the up face of the coin. And this is also another possibility, that Afghanistan team lose both tosses, tail and tail. So these are the possible 4 sample points or experimental outcomes of tossing a coin twice, and this setup outcome is called sample space. Now ما इरा दोबारा दर ज़ुबाने दरी हूँ तशरीह में कुनिम के sample space चीरा मेगा मजमुआ outcome experiment वो set outcomes रा sample space मेगा. मसलन अफगानिस्तान टीम दर इंडिया कहते इंडिया 2 गेम्स दारा, वो ये 2 एक्सपेरिमेंट शुद और दर 2 गेम वो टॉस के में कुना वो 2 बारी में शा वो एक्सपेरिमेंट माचियस टॉस अ काइन ट्वाइस के बाद काइन या टॉस 2 बारी शवा आले सैंपल स्पेस से ये 2 बारी के टॉस शवा वो चियस वो ये सैंपल स्पेसेस. अवलीन आउटकम ची बरामद हेड हेड. ये हेड बई माना कि अफगानिस्तान टीम टॉस रा बुर्द विन कद. कोई चेतोर हेड हेड ये बई माना कि यक गेम दर दिली प्ले मेशा उनजा के अफगानिस्तान टीम कैप्टन टॉस कद उ टॉस रा विन कद और हेड बरामद सरे सिका. दोम गेम के दर मद्रास प्ले में कुना उंजम के टॉस का दोम टॉस उंजम हेड सरे कॉइन सरे सिका बरामद 2 टॉसेस शुद हर 2 टॉसेस के सु टीम अफगानिस्तान बोर्ड यक आउटकम हेड और दोम आउटकम हेड 2 टॉसेस शुद हर 2 अफगानिस्तान टीम बोर्ड. ये खो यक इम्कानात शुद. खो ये इम्कानात दारा कि अफगानिस्तान टीम दर दिली टॉस के कद हेड बरामद विन कद, खुद दर मद्रास के टॉस कद टेल बरामद यानी लूज कद. ये इम्कान दारा कि अफगानिस्तान टीम के दर दिली टॉस कद को उरा लूज कद और दर मद्रास के टॉस कद हेड बरामद सरे से का उरा विन कद. ये इम्कान दारा और ये इम्कान दारा कि अफगानिस्तान टीम हर 2 टॉसेस के उरा از دست داد پورا لوز کد. در دلی هم تاس لوز شد ٹیل برآمد سر سکا اور در مدراس هم ٹیل برآمد سر سکا. یہ 4 आउटकम्स इम्कानात दारा सिटी आउटकम दर सैंपल स्पेस मेगा. काउंटिंग रूल. Counting rule is a statistical measure that we can use to determine the number of possible experimental outcomes of an experiment. Counting rule is used to count, to determine, to define, to identify the number of outcomes of an experiment. Before assigning probability to any experimental outcome, statistician can count, can determine the number of experimental outcomes of an experiment using counting rule. For example, if experiment is of n number of steps and each step carry k number of experimental outcomes, means there is one n number of steps experiment, trial steps. For example, toss a coin 5 times. So when we are tossing a coin 5 times, so the steps, the trials of these experiments are 5. This experiment, tossing a coin, carry 5 steps, 5 trials. We have to 5 times toss a coin. So I am generalizing that suppose we have experiment and experiment carry n number of steps. Experiment carry how much steps? N number of steps, and each step carry the outcomes k. Each step carry k outcomes. So how we can determine the number of experimental outcomes of this multiple step experiment? I am again repeating, suppose experiment carry n number of trials, n number of steps, and each step, each trial carry k outcomes. K is a symbol, not specific value. So each step carry k outcomes. So how we can determine the total number of outcomes of these n number of steps? So we will use the counting rule is this. K1 means the outcome of the first trial or first step, multiplied by the outcome of the second trial or second step, K2, multiplied by the outcome of third step or third trial, and so on, multiplied by the outcome of the nth step, the last trial, the last step. So counting rule is just the multiplication of the number of outcomes of each step. What is counting rule? Simply the multiplication of the number of outcomes of n number of trials or n number of steps of an experiment. How many outcomes we have in this n steps? N number of outcomes. Kn represent the nth outcome. So we are just multiplying outcome of the first step multiplied by outcome of the second step multiplied by outcome of the third step, and so on, multiplied by the outcome of the nth step, last trial. So this is the counting rule formulation. Ma counting rule ra dobara dar zubani dari megam counting rule chias. Counting rule yak statistical formulas yak pemaish andazas ke sare ye formul ya bakoma ki ye formul statistician count में कुना मुहासिबा में कुना अंदाजा में कुना मालूम में कुना कि एक्सपेरिमेंट मजमुआ ची कदर एक्सपेरिमेंटल आउटकम्स दारा बकोमा की काउंटिंग रूल अंदाजा में शा मुहासिबा में शा मालूम में शा कि एक्सपेरिमेंट ची कदर आउटकम्स दारा یک आउटकम داره دو आउटकम داره دا आउटकम داره یا 100 आउटकम داره با کمک کاونتینگ رول تعداد आउटकम्स काउंट میشه आइडेंटिफाई میشه डिटरमिन میشه ما اینجا یک جنرال مثال وضع کردیم که ما एक्सपेरिमेंट میکنیم که او एक्सपेरिमेंट یاس او ان نمبر اف स्टेप्स داره ان ट्रायल्स داره एक्सपेरिमेंट in number of steps داره او هر step k outcomes داره. خب چطور اندازه میشه، محاسبه میشه توتل تعداد outcomes experiment او وقتی که experimental outcome هم هر وقتی که experimental outcome هر steps ضرب میشه کت خود. مثلا n trials است، n steps است، تعداد steps n است که فعلا معلوم نیست او هر step یک outcome k داره. خب ما که او را کاونت محاسبه اندازه میکنیم توتال تعداد outcomes را ما چی میکنیم؟ outcome اولین trial یا step را ضرب میکنیم با outcome دوم step ضرب میکنیم با outcome سوم step. یک کلگی outcome که است او کت خود ضرب شده میره. به این فرمول مجموعه set outcome یا sample space experiment محاسبه میشه، اندازه میشه، معلوم میشه. ما suppose let me explain by putting one simple example, that is journal example, that we multiply the experimental outcomes of the n number of steps with each other and we find the total number of experimental outcomes. For example, toss a coin twice. This is experiment that we are tossing a coin 2 times. So we know that when we toss a coin, so toss a coin carry 2 outcomes. Each trial, each step carry how much outcomes? 2 outcomes. One is head, other is tail. I am again repeating, toss a coin. This is experiment. And toss a coin experiment carry how much outcomes? 2 outcomes. One is head and other is tail. So these are the 2 steps, 2 trials of tossing a coin because we have to toss a coin twice. So when we will toss a coin twice, 2 times we will toss and each toss carry 2 outcomes. So we will multiply the number of outcomes of each toss with each other. So number of steps, number of trials are 2. Toss a coin twice and each step carry 2 outcomes, head and tail. So to count the number of outcomes of this experiment, to estimate the total experimental outcomes of this experiment, we will multiply the outcomes of each step with each other. So using counting rule to determine the outcomes, what are the outcomes of the first step? 2. And what are the outcomes of the second step? 2. 2 multiplied by 2 is equal to 4. How much are the possible outcomes of tossing a coin twice? 4 total outcomes are possible. So I am again repeating that counting rule is used to determine the total number of outcomes of an experiment, and how we can estimate the number of outcomes simply multiplying the outcomes of each step with each other. Like for example, toss a coin twice. So when we will toss a coin twice, so there are 2 steps. How many steps? 2 steps. And each step carry how much outcomes? 2 outcomes. So we will multiply the outcomes of first step 2 with the outcome of the second step 2. So 2 multiplied by 2 is equal to 4. The total number of outcomes are 4. Or for example, suppose we toss a coin 3 times. So what are the total steps of the experiment? 3 steps. 3 times we have to toss. And each step will carry how much outcome? 2. So to determine the total number of outcomes of this experiment, multiply the experimental outcome of each step with each other. So 3 steps, each step carry 2 outcomes. 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2 is equal to 8. The total number of experimental outcomes are 8. Let me repeat this in dari. Masalan ma sekara toss mekunum khuduwari. Ye yak experiment است. toss a coin خو چند واری باید تاس شوه؟ 2 واری. یعنی اکسپریمنت 2 steps داره، 2 trials داره، 2 مرحله داره. او یه معلوم است که هر تاس، هر step 2 outcomes داره. یا خو head سر سکه بالا میه یا ټیل سر سکه بالا میه. یعنی هر تاس 2 outcomes داره او اکسپریمنت 2 تاسز داره. خو هر تاس که 2 outcomes داره خو باید steps trial چند است؟ 2 است. outcomes هر تاس که از سوکت خود باید ضرب شد. خو outcome اولین تاس چند است؟ 2 است. یا head میبره یا ټیل. او ضرب شوه کت outcome دوم تاس اوم چند outcome داره؟ 2 داره. خو 2 ضرب 2 برابر به 4. توتل تعداد outcome اکسپریمنت چند برآمد؟ 4. ما دوباره میگم که کاونتینگ رول چی است؟ با کمک کاونتینگ رول مجموعه تعداد outcome یک اکسپریمنت اندازه میشه، محاسبه میشه، کلکولیت میشه، معلوم میشه. اینجا اکسپریمنت یه است که باید 2 واری تاس شوه. چند واری؟ 2 واری. steps 2 است او هر واری که تاس شوه هر واری outcome چند است؟ 2 است. خو یک واری که تاس شوه و 2 outcome داره او چند واری باید تاس شوه؟ 2 واری. خو یک واری که تاس شد 2 outcome 2 داره او دوم واری که تاس شد دوم 2 را 2 کدی 2 ضرب شوه توتل outcome کلکولیت میشه. ایره میگه کاونتینگ رول. 4 برآمد. For example, roll a die twice. یک دای چکر اگر شما رول میکنین 2 واری باید رول شوه. خو کاونتینگ رول چی است؟ کاونتینگ رول یه است که باید اکسپریمنتل outcomes هر step کت خود باید ضرب شوه. خو اینجا اکسپریمنت چی است؟ رول ا دای توایس که باید چکک است و 2 واری رول شوه او هر واری که چکه رول میشه و outcome 6 داره. خو اگر یک واری چکه رول شوه 6 outcome میبره او 2 واری که چکه شوه دوم واری دوباره 6 outcome میه. علی توتل تعداد مجموع تعداد outcomes چطور کلکولیت میشه؟ ملتیپلای باید ضرب شوه outcomes هر step. خو اینجا یک واری که دای رول میشه و 6 outcome سر چکه بالا امکانات داره یا خو یک بالا میه. اینجا شما رول دای اگزامپل کردین یه رول دای 6 outcome داره. یک واری که رول شوه یا یک میبره یا 2 یا 3 یا 4 یا 5 یا 6. خو اینجا در اگزامپل است که باید دای که از 2 واری رول شوه. خو یک واری که رول میشه 6 outcome داره، دوباره که رول میشه پسم 6 outcome داره. علی توتل outcome چطور محاسبه میشه؟ باید outcomes هر ترایل یا هر step که خود ضرب شوه. خو اول رول 6 outcome، دوم رول 6 outcome، 6 ضرب 6 توتل تعداد outcome 36 است. خو یه example should roll a die twice. I'm again repeating that if we will roll a die 2 times, so how much experimental outcomes are possible? We will calculate, estimate, we will determine the outcome using counting rule. What is the counting rule? Multiply the outcomes of each step to determine the number of experimental outcomes of the experiment. So here we have 2 steps, 2 trials, and each step carries 6 outcomes. So we will multiply the 6 outcomes of the first step with the 6 outcomes of the second step, and 6 multiplied by 6 is equal to 36. So total possible experimental outcomes by rolling a die twice. How much these are? 36. For example, call to 5 customers. So experiment is a call to the customer, and this experiment carry 5 steps. 5 times the sale manager will call. So 5 times means 5 steps. And each call, each experiment carry 2 outcomes. purchase or does not purchase. So how to determine the total number of experimental outcome using counting rule? Just multiply the outcomes of each steps. So we have 5 trials, 5 calls, and each call carry 2 outcomes. So we will multiply the outcomes of 5 calls. 2 multiplied by 2